want you to picture a very specific moment. And, I think everyone listening has had this moment. It's usually late at night, or maybe it's right in the middle of some high-stress meeting, and the room is just dead silent. And your thumb is just hovering there over your phone screen. You've typed out the text, somewhere like deep in the back of your lizard brain. Yeah, you probably shouldn't send it.
Oh, there's a little voice, a little alarm bell going off somewhere.
A tiny little red flag is waving.
Yeah.
Your logic center is screaming at you. But the pressure is there. It's building up behind this dam inside your chest.
The pressure is enormous. It feels like you have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
And then just snap. You hit send. And the literal millisecond, that little delivered status pops up beneath the message. Your stomach just vanishes. It drops right through the floor. It's a physical feeling, isn't it?
It's physically painful. That is the universal moment of regret.
It is so visceral. It's that voice in your head just screaming, why didn't I just wait 10 seconds? Just 10 more seconds. Or, maybe it's not a text. Maybe you're at dinner and someone makes a little comment about politics or your job or something.
Something that just pushes a button.
Pushes that one button, and before you've even processed the thought, a sentence just flies out of your mouth that just sucks all the oxygen out of the room.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there watching the damage spread across the table thinking, who said that? Did I say that?
That feeling of dissociation is actually really key to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's what we're digging into, that specific phenomenon. In the stack of sources we pulled for this deep dive, and we're looking at some really fascinating translated Vietnamese psychological texts alongside modern stoic philosophy. They use the term bốc đồng.
Bốc đồng.
Now that translates to impulsivity, but as I was reading through these notes, it feels heavier than just being impulsive. It feels like a sudden, unthinking surge, like a flash flood.
It does. It carries more weight. And usually when we talk about this, whether we call it bốc đồng or impulsivity, we immediately frame it as a failure.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. If I send that text or if I snap at a coworker, my first thought isn't, what an interesting psychological mechanism at play. My first thought is, I'm a mess. I have no self-control. I am a child in an adult's body.
We instantly label it as a moral failure.
Yes. We moralize it. We treat it like a sin.
We tell ourselves we are weak or undisciplined or immature. It's like we have this internal judge that just slams the gavel down and yells, guilty of being a complete disaster.
Right. Case closed.
But today, we're doing something very, very different. We are pivoting.
Okay, pivoting away from the self-loathing.
Exactly. We are taking a deep dive into a set of sources that challenges that entire narrative. We're looking at impulsivity through the lens of Stoicism. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Stoic perspective turns our modern understanding of impulsivity completely on its head.
Okay, how so? Because, surely screaming at a waiter or sending a rage text it's bad.
Right.
Like, objectively, that's not a good thing to do.
The action itself might be harmful, sure, the consequences can be bad, but the Stoics don't view the impulse itself as some kind of monster you have to hunt down and kill, and they certainly don't see it as a reason for self-loathing.
So, what do they see it as?
They see it as information. If a Stoic philosopher were standing right there next to you after you sent that text, they wouldn't scold you, they wouldn't call you weak.
What would they do? Just stand there silently judging me?
No, they would ask a very specific, very cold, and very precise question. They'd ask, what happened internally right before that moment?
Okay, let's unpack that. Because usually my focus is entirely on the explosion. I'm just looking at the wreckage, the crater I just made in my life. You're saying they look at the fuse.
They look at the mechanism. The core Stoic insight here, and this is defined really clearly in our source text, is that impulsivity isn't actually a behavior. That's the end result. It is an internal movement. It's a reflex that happens faster than your consciousness can catch up to it. It's a mechanism that just hasn't been illuminated yet.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then, it isn't to learn how to suppress ourselves even harder. Because I feel like I'm already trying to suppress everything all the time, and clearly it's not working out for me.
No, and that is such a crucial distinction. We are not here to learn suppression. Suppression is actually a huge part of the problem, which we'll get to in just a minute. We are here to understand the mechanism so we don't have to live in fear of ourselves.
To not be afraid of your own reaction.
Exactly. So we're going to look at the psychological roots, why we explode in the first place. Then we'll dig into the hidden mechanisms, the things that form in the dark. After that, the toll this takes on our soul, the very real cost. And finally, we'll get into some, yes, admittedly uncomfortable but extremely effective Stoic strategies to actually handle it.
Really like the sound of that. We aren't trying to become robots. We're just trying to understand the machine. So, okay, let's jump right in. Segment 1, the psychological roots. Why do we explode? Because I think the common assumption, and I definitely hold this view myself, is that impulsive people are just a bit wild. They're undisciplined. They're the people who eat the second slice of cake or buy the expensive shoes or book the flight because they just don't have the discipline to say no. They just lack that moral fiber.
That is the myth of weakness. It's the standard cultural narrative. We assume impulsivity comes from a lack of discipline, a lack of control, but the sources we're looking at today argue the exact opposite.
The opposite.
The complete opposite. Impulsivity often comes from too much control, not too little.
Wait, okay, hold on. That sounds completely counterintuitive. If I have too much control, wouldn't I, never be impulsive? Isn't control the antidote to impulsivity?
You would think so, wouldn't you? It makes logical sense on the surface. But think of it this way. Impulsivity is very often the breaking point of prolonged suppression.
The breaking point.
Yeah. Imagine your internal mind, your psyche, is a physical room, just a standard empty room.
Okay, I'm in the room. It's got white walls.
Perfect. Now, let's just walk through an average Tuesday. You get into work, and the first thing you see is an email from a client. And it's just slightly passive-aggressive. It's annoying. You want to write back, a very pointed email setting them straight. But you want to be professional, so what do?
I swallow it. I take a deep breath, and I write, "Thanks so much for the feedback. We'll look into it." And I hit send with a completely fake smile on my face.
Right, you don't process the annoyance, you don't deal with it, you just shove it into the room, you put a little cardboard box in the corner, then you go to lunch and they messed up your order. It's a small thing. You don't want to be that guy who complains about a salad.
Right, you don't want to make a scene.
So you swallow the irritation, you smile and say it's fine, and you put another box in the room.
I see where this is going. The room is getting crowded.
It's getting very crowded. By 4:00 p.m., you've swallowed a dozen of these small frustrations to maintain this image of a controlled, professional adult. You've dealt with traffic, with budget cuts, with awkward conversations. The room is now floor-to-ceiling boxes. There is literally nowhere left to move. The air is stale.
And then my partner comes home and asks me a simple question like, "What do you want for dinner?"
And you explode. You snap, not because of the question. The question was tiny, it was innocent. You explode because there's literally no space left in the room. That final, tiny stimulus, that question, was just one box too many.
So the explosion wasn't about dinner at all.
Not even a little bit. The Stoics warn us against this kind of this constant suppression, because suppression doesn't make the emotion disappear, it just compresses it. It turns it into something dense and volatile.
It's still in the room.
It's
just lying in wait.
Precisely. It creates this highly pressurized internal environment. And this leads us directly to the next concept, which is willpower fatigue.
Willpower fatigue.
We often treat willpower like it's this infinite magic source of energy. Like it's a character trait that you just have. Oh, he has a lot of willpower. She's very disciplined.
Right, like it's a muscle you're either born with or you're not.
But the research, and certainly what the Stoics observed, suggests it's not a muscle, it's a resource. It's more like a battery. And that battery depletes over the course of the day.
So it actually burns out. It gets used up.
It burns out, and it burns out fast. I mean, just think about the difference between who you are at 9:30 a.m. on a Monday morning, fresh off the weekend, and who you are at 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday.
Well, they are two completely different human beings. Monday me is ambitious and patient and ready to take on the world. Thursday me is barely hanging on by a thread. Thursday me would fight someone over a parking spot.
Exactly. You can hold it together for days. You can be the perfect employee, the perfect partner for 1 day, 2 days, maybe even 3 days. You are white-knuckling it through your life.
Yeah.
You are using your will to override every single little impulse. But eventually, that resource runs dry. The battery hits red.
And when the will is too tired to stand in the way.
When it's too tired to stand between the stimulus, that annoying email, that rude comment, and your reaction, boom. And here's the kicker, the really important part. In that moment, your impulsivity isn't a character flaw. It isn't because you're a bad person. It's simply the predictable result of you using raw willpower as a substitute for true awareness. You were just muscling through the week instead of actually seeing what was happening inside you.
That really hits home.
Yeah.
It's a difference between control and understanding. I feel like so many of us build this hard outer shell. We think, if I just don't react, if I just appear calm, I'm winning. But inside, we're screaming our heads off.
And that shell is so dangerous because controlling your behavior without understanding the emotion that's driving it creates a huge disconnect. Inside that perfect, calm shell, the hurt, the need, the anger, it all still exists. It's alive, it's simmering, it's cooking.
So it's not gone, it's just hidden.
Right. So when that shell finally cracks, and believe me, it always cracks, the reaction isn't just a little leak, it's a full-blown explosion.
Because it's been pressurized, like shaking a can of soda for 5 minutes and then opening it.
Correct. The core mechanical failure here, according to our Stoic sources, is the lack of a gap.
The gap.
The pause.
Yeah.
The space between stimulus and response. For a person who's in an impulsive state, that gap is effectively zero. Stimulus happens, reaction happens instantaneously. The Stoic goal isn't to weaken your emotions. They aren't saying don't feel anger or don't feel desire.
Which is what I always thought Stoicism was about, just being a robot.
Common misconception. No, they are trying to thicken the gap.
Thicken the gap. I like that image. It's not about stopping the train, it's about making the track longer so you have more time to see the station and hit the brakes.
Or just time to decide if you even want to be on that train in the first place. If the gap is thin, a tiny stimulus, like your partner asking about dinner, leads to a massive reaction before you even know you're reacting. But if the gap is thick, the emotion arrives, it knocks on the door, and you have time to look through the peephole and decide whether or not to open it.
There's another root cause mentioned in the source material that I found really surprising and honestly quite touching. It wasn't about anger or willpower or discipline. It shifted the conversation to something much more vulnerable.
The need to be seen.
The need to be seen.
Yes, this is a profound insight. We often assume impulsive outbursts, especially the angry ones, are aggressive acts. But the source argues they are often, at their root, defensive. They stem from a deep-seated feeling of being invisible, unheard, unvalued.
Can you explain that a bit more? How is yelling at someone a result of feeling invisible? It seems like a contradiction.
Well, imagine you're in a team meeting and you feel like your contributions are being ignored or talked over again and again. You try to speak up, someone cuts you off. You have an idea, it's dismissed without consideration. You start to feel like a ghost in the room. The pressure builds, the frustration builds, and then suddenly you snap. You interrupt someone loudly. That outburst, in that context, isn't really intended to destroy the meeting or hurt the person. It's a desperate, primal attempt to simply exist.
It's like raising your hand and just screaming, I am here, I'm in this room, acknowledge me.
Exactly. It's not malice, it's a survival instinct for the ego. When the psyche feels like it's being erased or ignored, it will create a very loud noise just to prove to itself that it's still there.
But then, of course, we run straight into this other trap, what the sources call the adult illusion. We tell ourselves, I'm a grown-up. Adults shouldn't be impulsive. Adults shouldn't need to scream to be seen.
And that is such a dangerous belief, because if you truly believe that adults shouldn't have these impulses, then every single time you slip up, you view it as proof of your total failure as a person. I messed up, therefore I am fundamentally broken.
And that creates a cycle, right?
It creates a toxic, vicious cycle. The self-blame leads to shame. The shame leads to more suppression. I have to hide this ugly part of myself. The suppression leads to more internal pressure, which of course leads to more impulsivity. You're trying to solve the problem of the thing that's causing it.
Yeah, the source gave a great real-world example of this that I think everyone listening can relate to. The high-powered professional who stays completely calm under immense pressure. Big deals, corporate crises, but then absolutely snaps over a tiny, insignificant email.
That is the classic example. You see it all the time. Someone will handle a multi-million-dollar merger negotiation without even blinking. They're a rock. Then they come home, open their laptop, see a typo in a subject line from a junior colleague, and they just lose their mind.
And then they hate themselves for it. They think, why am I so petty? Why am I letting this tiny thing get to me? I'm so weak.
Right. But the Stoic perspective would be, the issue was never the email. The email was completely irrelevant. The issue was that for the last 6 months, they have been running on empty. They have not had a single moment of internal pause. They've been white-knuckling it for so long that their capacity to handle even the smallest frustration is gone.
The email was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
It was the single drop of water that made the full glass overflow. So a Stoic wouldn't ask, why did you yell about the email? They would ask, why have you been running in a state of depletion for 6 months without noticing or addressing it?
Why were you in that state for so long?
Exactly. And that brings us perfectly to the second segment of our deep dive, the hidden mechanisms, how this whole process actually forms in the dark. Because the explosion is loud and obvious, but the fuse burns silently for a long, long time.
Okay, let's talk about that, the silent acceleration. The source says impulsivity is formed long before the action ever takes place.
Long, long before. By the time you yell, by the time you hit send, the process is already finishing. It's the grand finale. It actually starts with the tiny little emotions we ignore because they seem too small to name.
Like what? What's too small to name?
A slight prickle of annoyance, a bit of fatigue in the afternoon, a vague, cloudy sense of unfairness about something at work. We think, oh, that's nothing. I can just brush that off. I'm tough. I'm fine.
I'm fine. It's fine. The two most dangerous words in the English language, probably.
Probably, I'm fine. But the stoic insight here is that unnamed emotions operate in the dark. Just because you didn't give it a name doesn't mean it stopped working on you. In the dark, it doesn't shrink. It accelerates. It gathers mass. It connects with other unnamed emotions.
It's building an army in the shadows.
That's a great way to put it. And there's also a linguistic trick the source mentioned that I think is so powerful. It's about how we talk to ourselves, the difference between identity and presence.
Right. This sounds a little bit like semantics, but you're saying it's more than that.
It sounds like semantics, but it's actually structural to how our brains process reality. We tend to say, I am angry, or I am frustrated. When you say, I am, you are fusing your identity completely with the emotion. You are giving that emotion total authority. You're saying, this anger is me. Me is this anger.
So, what's the stoic correction? How should we be saying it instead?
The stoic correction is to shift the language to observation. Instead of, I am angry, you say, there is anger appearing in me.
There is anger appearing in me. Huh. It sounds a bit detached. Almost like you're narrating a nature documentary about yourself. And here we see anger in its natural habitat.
It is detached, and that is precisely the point. That little linguistic shift creates that crucial distance we were talking about. It creates the gap. It turns you from the participant who's being swept away by the emotion into the observer who is watching it pass. I am not the anger. I am the space in which the anger is happening.
And that stops the ego from getting so defensive.
It helps, yes.
Yeah.
Which is important because ego defense is another one of these hidden mechanisms the source highlighted. Oh, absolutely. So many impulsive acts, when you really look at them, there's just the ego trying to restore its status after it feels like it's been attacked.
Exactly. If you feel slighted or suspected of something or disrespected, the ego panics. It perceives a threat to its safety and its status in the tribe, and it wants to reestablish dominance or safety immediately. So you snap back with a witty comeback or a sharp criticism, not to solve the problem, but to protect the image of the self.
In doing all of this, the suppressing, the ego defense, it requires so much energy, which leads to this other mechanism, attention fatigue.
Attention is finite. This is so crucial to understand. Think of your attention like the fuel gauge in your car. When your attention is focused entirely on external expectations, deadlines, other people's feelings, social norms, traffic, the news, your internal attention, your ability to notice what's going on inside you drops to zero. You stop monitoring your own dashboard.
You're driving the car and you're so focused on everything happening outside the window that you never once look down to check if the engine is overheating or if you're about to run out of gas. And then you're completely shocked when the car sputters to a halt on the side of the highway or smoke starts pouring out from under the hood. Impulsivity in this model actually forces you to look inward. It's a mechanism that screams, hey, pay attention to me. Something is seriously wrong in here.
It's the check engine light, but instead of a little orange icon, it's a deafening alarm and a small explosion.
A very loud one. And we also have this very human tendency to do what the source calls the too late evaluation. We only judge ourselves after we've already messed up. We say, ugh, I shouldn't have done that. Which is functionally useless, isn't it? It's just guilt. It doesn't help you for next time. The Stoics, on the other hand, look before. They ask the question, what state was I in an hour ago? What about yesterday? Impulsivity is prepared by a prolonged state of mind. If you want to stop the explosion, you don't look at the explosion. You look at the accumulation of micro-choices that led to it.
Micro-choices.
Yes, the explosion is never caused by one big decision. It's caused by ignoring 1,000 small things, skipping a 5-minute rest, not saying the one small thing that needed to be said in a meeting, enduring just a little more discomfort, The source uses that really poignant example of the highly disciplined person who eats right, works hard, hits the gym every day, but then explodes at their family over nothing.
That one hurts. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Why do we do that? Why do we manage to hold it together for everyone else, but then hurt the people closest to us, the people we actually love?
Because the family, the home, is supposed to be the safe space. It's the one place where the pressure valve is finally allowed to release. They kept it together for the boss, for the client, for the strangers on the street, because the social and professional cost of exploding there is incredibly high. But when they get home, the willpower battery is completely drained. The internal room is full of boxes, and the family gets the explosion.
That's a heavy thought. It implies that our discipline and professionalism at work is actually being paid for by our family's peace of mind.
That is a very sobering way to look at it, yes. And it's often true. And this leads perfectly into our next segment, the existential impact, the cost to the soul. Because when you yell at your family or you send that horrible text, it's not just about the external consequence, it destroys something deep inside of you.
Yeah, the source talks about the loss of self-trust.
That is the deepest wound of all. It's not, I made a mistake, it's, I cannot rely on myself. Imagine being in a car where the steering wheel sometimes just disconnects from the wheels. That's how a person struggling with impulsivity feels about themselves. I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyway. When you lose faith in your own ability to govern yourself, you start looking for external crutches.
External crutches, like what?
Start wanting rigid rules. You want someone else to tell you what to do. You want strict schedules, restrictive diets, anything that takes the decision-making out of your hands. You essentially try to build a prison for yourself because you don't trust the person driving the car.
And this must breed a lot of silent shame.
Oh, immense shame. Because we compare our messy, chaotic interiors, the anger, the strange impulses, the chaos, to everyone else's calm, curated exteriors.
Everyone else looks so put together on social media or in the boardroom. They look like these perfect, cool marble statues.
Right. And we know that inside we are a raging mess. So we feel this deep, isolating shame. And shame causes an internal contraction. You physically and psychologically shrink. And ironically, that state of contraction makes self-regulation even harder. You can't regulate yourself properly when you're shrinking in shame. You can't breathe.
So we end up living in what the source calls guard mode.
Always in guard mode. The fear of one's own impulsivity leads to a life of constant self-monitoring. You are constantly watching yourself, policing your every word, your every expression. Don't say that, don't look like that, rein it in.
It sounds exhausting.
The result is a life that looks fine on the outside, maybe even successful, but feels absolutely breathless and unfree on the inside. You are the warden of a prison of your own making.
And then there's that value gap too. The pain of acting in ways that directly contradict our own values. I deeply value kindness. I really believe I'm a kind person. But I just said something incredibly cruel to someone I love. I value patience, but I just rushed through something important.
That creates the agonizing sense of being an imposter. I'm a fake. I say I value these things, but my actions prove that I don't. It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
It erodes your fundamental sense of identity.
And this all brings us to the paradox of perfection.
Yes. The more we try to be this perfect, non-impulsive person, this marble statue, the further we actually get from our true, authentic selves. We are chasing an impossible image. Stoicism, contrary to what many people think, does not seek perfection. It seeks internal straightness or integrity.
Internal straightness. That's a really interesting phrase. What does that mean in practice?
It means not lying to yourself. It means having the courage to admit, you know what, I am feeling angry right now, or I am feeling weak and exhausted, rather than pretending to be a flawless statue. Straightness means not lying to yourself about why you failed. It means facing the reality of your internal state with clear eyes, rather than just pasting a fake smile over it.
It really sounds like we are fighting a battle on two fronts here. One is the battle inside us, this whole internal mechanism we've been discussing, but the other one, it feels structural. It's the world we live in, which is what segment 4 covers, the structural trap, society versus the individual.
We have to acknowledge the environment. If we don't, we are missing at least half the picture. We are all living inside a modern paradox. Society demands perfect control. Be professional, keep a stiff upper lip, don't be emotional. But at the same time, society engineers environments that are designed specifically to trigger our impulses.
You're talking about social media, the 24-hour news cycle.
The entire attention economy, I mean, think about its business model. It literally monetizes immediate, unthinking reactions. Anger, fear, desire, outrage. The algorithm does not want you to pause and reflect. The algorithm wants you to click, to comment, to share, to rage. It wants your gap to be zero.
So we are blaming ourselves individually for reacting to a system that is literally designed by some of the most brilliant engineers in the world to make us react.
Precisely. We are like rats in a cage that is designed to shock us, and then we blame ourselves for jumping. We sit there thinking, why can't I just sit still? Well, because the floor is electrified.
And on top of that, there's a culture of immediate judgment. Everything is sliced out of its context.
Moments are captured, screenshotted, shared, and judged instantly by millions of people. This creates this constant low-grade, high-tension state where we are all terrified of slipping up. And what does that constant fear do? It increases our internal pressure, which ironically increases the likelihood that we will slip up. It's a horrible self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a trap. And in this trap, society praises surface control.
We praise the appearance of calm. We rarely, if ever, ask about the internal cost of that calm. We say, oh, he's so professional, he never shows any emotion. But the stoic warning is that surface control without internal understanding creates incredibly fragile people. They look like marble on the outside, but they're actually made of thin glass, one tap in the right place, and they shatter into a million pieces.
And when we do shatter, there is absolutely no space for conscious failure.
None. Society demands an immediate apology. Fixed it. Issue a PR statement. Move on. We skip the most important part, which is the data processing phase. We skip the part where we are allowed to sit with the failure and ask, why did this actually happen? What can I learn from this? We just want to sweep it under the rug and get back to work.
So, okay, if the world is rigged against us and our internal wiring is frayed and we're running on an empty battery, what do we actually do? This brings us to segment 5, practical stoic strategies. And the source warns us, this is the uncomfortable work.
And I really want to emphasize that word uncomfortable. These are not easy life hacks. These are not 3 simple steps to never be angry again. These are disciplines. And the goal here changes. The goal is not how do I never get impulsive again? It is how do I not get dragged away when the impulse appears?
Okay, let's start with strategy number 1. Don't act to prove control. What does that mean?
This is a subtle one, but it's very common. When you feel a strong urge, say an urge to eat that slice of cake, the common reflex is to immediately suppress it or do the exact opposite just to prove to yourself that you're in charge. You might think, I want to eat that cake, so I will aggressively not eat it and I will just stare at it to show it who's boss.
Right, the wrestling match.
It's still a reaction. You are still dancing with the impulse. You are giving it all your attention and energy. The stoic approach is different.
So what should I do instead of wrestling with it?
You observe it. You don't fight it immediately, you just look at it. You say, okay, there's a desire for cake appearing in me. You don't engage in a power struggle with it. You just note its presence like you'd note a cloud in the sky.
Okay. Strategy number 2. Name the movement early. We touched on this idea before, but let's get really practical. How do I do this in the heat of the moment?
You need to name the internal shift before it becomes an external behavior. So instead of letting the thought, I'm going to yell at this person form, you need to catch it earlier. You note the physiology. You say to yourself, there's a sense of urgency rising in my chest, or I can feel heat rising in my face, or my hands are tightening into fists.
Why does that help? It feels like just describing it.
Because when you name the physical sensation, you are shifting the activity in your brain from the amygdala, the reactive emotional center, to the prefrontal cortex, the logic and observation center. You are literally slowing the velocity of the emotion. You're turning it from a command into a piece of data.
You're observing it instead of being it. Which leads to strategy 3, detach from value.
Yes. You must shift your language from, I am an impulsive person, which is a permanent value judgment on your character, to an impulse is passing through me. It's like watching a cloud pass through the sky. You are the sky, not the cloud. Clouds come and go, the sky remains.
Okay, now for strategy 4. The source calls this one the hardest one, and that is to sit with the discomfort.
This is the crucible. This is where the real work happens. You must allow the impulse to exist without acting on it, and crucially, without aggressively suppressing it.
That sounds confusing. How do I not act on it but also not suppress it? Aren't those the only 2 options?
Think about holding a plank position at the gym. Your muscles are burning. Your body wants to drop. Gravity is pulling you down. You are shaking. But you don't drop, you just hold the tension. You feel the burn of the want to drop, or in this case, the want to send the text. You allow that fire to burn inside you, but you don't let it move your hands.
That sounds excruciatingly difficult.
It creates immense tension. It is physically uncomfortable. You will want to escape it. But sitting in that tension is where resilience is built. It is exactly like lifting a heavy weight and holding it at the point of failure. That is where the muscle grows. If you send the text, you get immediate relief from the tension, but you weaken the muscle for next time.
Okay, so strategy 5 is about making this easier. Pre-built pauses.
Exactly. Don't try to build a dam during a flood. It's too late then. You have to practice creating pauses when things are calm. Decide beforehand. Before I reply to any potentially stressful email, I will stand up and take 3 deep breaths. Or, I will never say yes to a big request in the moment. I will always say, let me check my calendar and get back to you.
So you're building speed bumps into your day.
You're building in automatic gaps, and the guiding question you can use here in those gaps is a powerful one. If I do this, how will I live with myself tomorrow?
Strategy 6, recognize fatigue. This is where I have to say I had a personal connection to the source material. It talks about having real human scrape, a moment of painful self-awareness.
Yes, and it's the realization that so many of your outbursts aren't really about anger at all. They're just symptoms of pure exhaustion. The impulse is a scream from your body that says, you are past your limit, stop. The strategy is simply to recognize that when you are tired, your gap is practically non-existent.
So what do you do with that recognition?
You protect yourself. You learn to say, I am too tired to have this conversation right now. Can we please talk about this in the morning? You don't make important decisions when you are exhausted. You learn to treat your fatigue with respect, rather than seeing it as a weakness you have to power through.
Strategy 7 is the time test.
This one is very simple but effective. When an impulse arises, just ask yourself, how long will this urge actually last if I do nothing? Most impulses have a very short half-life. They are incredibly intense for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. But if you can just wait for 10 minutes, they often die on their own because they haven't been fed by your action. They're like little fires that need constant fuel. If you start feeding them, they just burn out.
I like that. Okay, strategy 8, responsibility versus relief.
Impulsivity always promises immediate relief, catharsis. If I just scream, I'll feel so much better. And you might, for about 10 seconds. But Stoicism asks you to choose long-term lightness instead, and that comes from responsibility. If I don't scream, I will feel heavier right now. I have to hold this anger, but I will feel much, much lighter tomorrow because I won't have the shame and the burden of having to apologize and fix the damage.
And finally, a really important one, strategy 9, don't weaponize Stoicism.
This is so crucial for anyone listening. Do not use these tools to beat yourself up for being weak. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, Marcus Aurelius wouldn't have done that, so I'm a failure. Well, first of all, you aren't Marcus Aurelius. And second, he probably messed up all the time. He just didn't write about it in his journal. True Stoicism brings clarity, not rigidity. If you find yourself using it to hate yourself more, you are not doing it right.
So, if we manage to do all this, if we sit in the fire and we hold the plank and we name the feelings without judgment, where do we end up? What's the goal here? Which brings us to our final segment, the Promised Land.
It's all about reframing freedom. The Promised Land isn't some magical place where impulses never happen again. That's a fantasy. You will never be a robot. You will never be without emotions. The Promised Land is a place where impulses knock on your door, but they don't get to grab the steering wheel of your car.
So you start to see impulse as data.
Exactly. Your impulsivity transitions from being a sign of your immaturity or your failure into being a useful signal. It tells you things. It says, I am tired, or I am feeling unheard, or I am getting near my limit. It becomes a dashboard light, not a car crash.
And that allows you to start inviting your values in.
Yes. The ultimate goal is to widen that gap just enough to be able to invite your core values into the conversation before you act. The impulse screams, do this now, and in that pause you create, you can ask, I want to do this, but does this align with the person I'm trying to be? You can only ask that question if you have the space to ask it.
And it all comes back to integrity over perfection.
You don't need to be a perfect robot. You just need to be straight with yourself. Freedom isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of a pause.
Wow. Okay, let's try to bring this all home. To summarize this entire deep dive, impulsivity is a mechanism, not a moral sin. It thrives in fatigue and suppression. And the cure isn't more self-punishment. It's observation and building that gap.
That is the absolute core of it.
And as we close out, I want to leave our listener with a final provocative thought from our source material. It's a question to carry with you this week.
From today, when an impulse arises, instead of shaming yourself or justifying it, can you just pause and ask, what inside of me is needing to be seen that I have ignored for too long?
Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.